punish for the worst offenders. Under Draco's code, capital punishment was for the worst possible criminals who committed murder, rape, arson, or treason. Every major religion has sanctioned capital punishment at one time or another and has written it into their codes of law or religious scripture. Capital punishment was commonly used and supported by followers of Christianity as well as Judaism since the information of their legal relations. The Bible has even states, "Whoever sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood shall be shed." Genesis 9:6. Capital punishment has been a form of justice and punishment since the first set of laws made by Hammurabi in Hammurabi's code. It is evident that he supports the use of death penalty and believes that it's justifiable, which is proven by, quote, "an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, a life for a life." Hammurabi's code is used to base most modern forms of law and governance. Overall, the use of the death penalty has been prevalent since the first code of law was created by Hammurabi's code, and has been considered justifiable and morally acceptable throughout all of history. Advancements in the 21st century have made modern death penalty more ethical, proving that it can be undertaken humanely and correctly without botched executions, torture, or suffering for the worst of the worst criminals. Most recently, advancements in technology have allowed the death penalty to be more morally just, and such as supercomputers as an alternative way of lethal injection that could even bring more a form of ecstasy during death. In fact, according to one article, researchers say that they have built a computer system that can predict 92% accuracy with which death row inmates are most likely to be executed. The development, they hope, will lead to fairer appeals process. The supercomputer also has specific inclinations in how it chooses which. The researchers from Texas A&M University, Texarkana, and Lowell University in New Orleans report the International Journal of Law and Information Technology that neither severity of the crime nor race, the latter of which is often cited as key factor in convictions, are reliable forecasters for prisoners' fate. This allows more accurate cases where criminals have committed the most heinous crimes to be given with capital punishment, which, when chosen, there are ethical ways for these criminals to be put to death. One alternative option is from Switzerland with a device called the sarcopod, which is, according to the website that produces the device, is the concept of a capsule that could produce a rapid decrease in oxygen level while maintaining a low CO2 level. The conditions for a peaceful, even euphoric death was the belief behind the Sarco. Modern advancements in the death penalty have enabled the worst of the worst human beings can be humanely put to death, and provided death penalty is not inhumane. Further implication of why advancements can be humane and ethical proves the death penalty is not inhumane. There are alternatives too. Contingent 2, the death penalty is the most humane course of action in dealing with extreme cases. The death of the worst has addressed so far also can make some families feel more complete, which the sadness of losing a beloved family member never disappears, but the removal of the problem is one step.
How can you say that the death penalty is not inhumane if you cited Switzerland's suffocation technique?
It just lowers CO2 levels, and it is, raises CO2 levels and lowers oxygen levels, and it leads to a more euphoric death.
Therefore, you're suffocating.
They don't feel it there. Pretty much just leads to, it's pretty much just cuts off oxygen, and they pretty much do not experience it.
Okay. So you said 92 out of 100% lethal injections are carried out correctly.
No, I did not say that. I said the supercomputer that we have found can predict the death rate with 92% accuracy.
What about the other 8%?
Do you have any alternatives to the death penalty? So if we cannot put murderers, rapists, and pedophiles to death, then what is your alternative? What do you see more fit?
There's other forms such as reform and solitary confinement that can be used.
Okay, yeah, but in some countries, solitary confinement is seen as a form of torture, and would this be a permanent solitary confinement? Would this be the rest of their life, or would this be like temporary, or
What forms of employment can you use?
would the solitary confinement be like a life sentence?
It could be, or
Okay.
it could be as the judge sees fit.
Okay, let's see.
When you cited the Bible, did you realize that religion cannot be brought upon a death penalty case?
Let's see.
There's a reason that Catholics are excused from the jury.
So, the use of solitary confinement is,
His time's up.
okay.
Can we take a portion of our 2-minute timeout? Sorry, we received 2 minutes for.
Yeah, we got 3 minutes of timeout overall,
Yeah,
and you can use it however you want. That's what we were told.
yeah, and our second speaker, he's doing it by FaceTime too,
Yes.
and he's on
We
right now.
have him online.
Oh, you mean for now or just now earlier between the crossfire or both? Because he was,
It's bet-
Pardon?
They want to use their break time now.
oh, you want to do the break time now?
Yeah, they
Okay.
want to use 2
But
minutes.
not
the whole
not the whole
not the
time,
whole
can you give us like a minute portion?
So, okay, right, this one is pretty analog, so tell me what, right,
Can you give us 30 seconds?
30 seconds to
Prep.
Just
Prep.
to prep.
Yeah, say
Just
prep
for
time.
them or for you, for them?
It's for them, yeah.
For us,
Okay.
actually.
30 seconds? 30 seconds, yes,
Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yeah, how long do I have to speak?
3.
5.
I'm saying, how long do I have to speak for the others to hear?
How long do we have to speak for you to
How loud?
Oh,
like
no,
this
like
is
that,
fine. You're
like
fine.
that,
That's what you close.
yeah. Yeah. Alright. No, you did. Okay, our second, our second speaker's on the line, by the way, so
Okay.
they said it
Can you
was
just-
okay.
Can you just make sure it's turned all the way up so we can hear them?
Yeah, it's all the way,
Thank
up.
you.
I mean,
Can I have the second speaker's, his name?
Omari,
Amari Cunningham.
Do y'all want to put him in the middle so we can hear
Yeah,
him?
sure.
Put it right there, yeah.
Omari, you ready?
Yeah,
Alright, cool.
You can start.
okay. Hello, everyone. As you know, we are contending that we should abolish the death penalty, and I am the second speaker, and I will be rebutting the first speaker from the negative side. The first speaker brought up that the death penalty has been used as tradition for many years throughout many empires and made the fact known that that is one of the reasons we should keep the death penalty. However, many of these empires also have had many other traditions which we don't use because we see them as horribly inhumane now. Secondly, the negative side brought up the safe case of a supercomputer, which with 92% accuracy could predict, accurately predict death penalty cases. However, no matter how close we get to 100%, there's still going to be that percent which has a risk of still being found guilty when they are and still be put to death. That is one of the reasons we contend that the death penalty should be abolished, because there is a risk of wrongful convictions, and unlike other sentences, once that wrongful conviction is carried out with the death penalty, there is no going back. In addition, the negative side brought up the fact of the death penalty may bring up closure for the family. However, as the first speaker in the affirmative brought up, Kennedy, she brought up that often it actually doesn't bring closure for the family, especially in the risk and anxiety that it was a wrongful conviction leading to another innocent death. And even if there was no wrongful conviction, there often isn't closure for the family at all. Also, in the case of international executions, there is no way to prove that it's ethical, as the speaker Kennedy brought up. In China, a Uyghur is executed simply for the fact that they had a book that threatened the Chinese Communist Party. No matter how many supercomputers we use as it doesn't matter if in other countries the person is guilty of a crime if the crime doesn't even warrant the death penalty. And I would just like to ask the second side, they brought up the fact that this new HOD execution method is humane. Have we actually tested it? How do we know it's humane, or are we just using theory? Because, I mean, with lethal injection, it is supposed to be the most humane execution method, but when it is put to practice, it most often ends up not being humane. It often leads to botched executions, which makes the person suffer. So, with the death penalty, there's no way to actually test it until we put a person to death. And that leaves the window for huge, huge failure. Also, with the death penalty, the second side brought up religion, which, as Kennedy brought up after that speech, are we going to push a religion, which they brought up, only mentioned, I believe, Judaism and Christianity, maybe Islam, but are we going to push only 2 or 3 religions on the whole population to justify something as severe as a death penalty? That would just not be okay or ethical at all. So I think it's dangerous territory to use the death penalty to push, use religion to push the death penalty on a whole population, especially when this population may not even believe in the religion that we are using to justify it. And also, in authoritarian regimes across the world, such as Saudi Arabia, where they carry out mass executions, or Iran, not only do they carry out mass executions for the least severe crimes, which is totally unethical, they use religion, such as Islam, to push these mass executions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Isaac Hernandez. Let me know when you're ready. Hello, y'all. My name is Isaac Hernandez. I'm going to be the second speaker for the negative. I first want to start off with the sarcopods have been tested. They have been used actually in Switzerland. They've put several people to death. I don't know the specific number off the top of my head, but I know it's at least 100. And they have worked efficiently, no botched executions. So that there. You brought up wrongful conviction. So yes, I understand that convicting someone innocently to death is terrible, but allowing these murderers to walk among other human beings puts people at risk. Jorge Avila Torres was imprisoned for the murder of 20-year-old Navy Petty Officer Amanda Jean Snell and was later released. He later raped and murdered 8-year-old Laura Hobbs and 9-year-old Crystal Tobias in the comfort of his hometown, Zion, Illinois. The truth is, we'll never know if capital punishment deters criminals from killing again, but do we really want to risk finding out? If we value human life so much, are we willing to constantly put it at risk by allowing these prisoners to live? We are knowingly putting the life of a murderer over the life of the innocent if we decide to abolish the death penalty. Since 1973, we had 195 innocents killed on death row. It's been 50 years since 1973. We've had 26,000 homicides, most of which innocent people, I'm sure, a year in the United States. A year. And a lot of those people get released on death row or don't see death row. And then you guys brought up solitary confinement as a humane reaction to these. Solitary confinement is one of the most inhumane things possible, even a torture method in some countries. According to a Texas resident imprisoned for robbery, Constante Guadalupe, I went on hunger strike to bring attention to this torture. I haven't had contact with my wife, kids, brothers and sisters, parents and grandparents in 17 years. They took us out before the sun came up. You were put in a cage about twice the size of our 6-foot by 9-foot cells. The rest of the time you were locked up 23 to 24 hours a day, year after year, decade after decade. Constante said that the most difficult part was the lack of human contact. I miss not being able to go outside or just sit at a table and talk to people without having to yell out your door through the walls. I haven't held my kids in 17 years. The only touch I have had in that time was when the officer came to put the cuffs on me. This is according to The Guardian newspaper by Ed Pilkington. Another thing you guys brought up was the botched executions. Yes, there are botched executions with the lethal injection, but you guys failed to present a humane alternative other than locking someone in a box. And I question the reform that you guys plan to bring up, because we haven't seen many situations where there has been reform, or you guys failed to bring one up. Prisoners shouldn't be subjected to the harm or the danger of their crimes, yet you also allow them to stay in these prisons. Where Jesse Anderson, for instance, was murdered alongside serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer by fellow inmate and convicted murderer Christopher Starver at the Columbia Correctional Facility in 1994. You guys are prolonging the death of these people. It isn't humane just because you're not the one pulling the trigger. Just because someone else is, it leaves the absence of mind in your own. You also brought up that capital punishment doesn't deter crime, but then later stated that it's supposed to work as a fear factor, which is supposed to deter crime. But even then, capital punishment isn't supposed to deter crime. The death penalty isn't in place to deter crime. Its main function is to deal with the criminal's worth of death and hold them accountable for their actions. You also stated that it's very, I forgot the word you used, but it pertains more to the minorities, suggesting that the death penalty is racist, often a form of argument against this. But the death penalty isn't racist. If you want to call anybody racist, it's the judges in charge of the system. I don't know how to fix that. I can't say anything about that other than to abolish the judicial system that sets the capital punishment in place. That's all.
Thank you.
Hey, you can take time before.
Mark,
No.
no? You ready for the crossfire?
You ready for this?
Yeah.
Alright, cool.
Okay. Right.
Are we starting now?
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay. When you said that we brought up the fear factor, yes, we did. But we brought it up, if you look closely in the context of authoritarian regimes, you wouldn't say that it's wrong for China or an authoritarian regime to use the execution and to keep their people in line?
I'm sorry, was that a question? Or
Yes.
so are you asking about the Chinese using the death penalty to keep
Do you
people in
think
line?
it's wrong for an authoritarian regime to use the executions to keep their people in line with their governments?
Yes, I think that's wrong, but that's not what the capital punishment is for. It's to convict people to death for killing or for doing a harsh crime. To go off of that, you said that there was better alternatives like solitary confinement or reform. We already went on to prove that solitary confinement was inhumane, but would you want to elaborate on the reform that you plan?
Yeah, we could use life sentences. You can simply put someone in prison, you don't have to execute them. And you do realize what death row is. I mean, before they're executed, which many inmates are on death row for a very, very long time. They are in that prison's equivalent of solitary confinement. They're not just happy until they get executed.
So you're
In solitary confinement.
So you're willingly letting these people who killed, raped, did unspeakable things to be around other human beings, or worse, even be by themselves locked in a box?
I mean, if you're putting someone on death row, you're also putting them in a box until they're executed.
But that's until they're executed as opposed to the rest of their life.
Well, it basically is the rest of their life when they're executed. I mean,
Well, there's no arguing there, but so would you care to say or show more?
Thank you.
Can I take a 30-second time out?
Sure.
So, Armando. Given the fact that the other side mentioned about race in the justice system, are you saying they're basically saying that there's no bias in the are you saying that there's no bias in the justice system? And also, we never mentioned about race in our death penalty, one of the reasons why we're reformed. But you did say that rapists and killers should deserve to go to death. Okay, I feel you on that. But what about the other convicts that weren't, that are just sentenced to death and then not given a second chance? And that's where I have a problem with, because innocent people also go to die. And also the solitary confinement issue is that, yeah, you could say that it's also being tortured, but same way, if you execute someone, they're also being tortured because of lethal injection, as we mentioned in the case of Joanne James and Ellen E. Miller. The prison staff at Alabama rushed the execution. They didn't follow protocol because they were rushing because the warrant of execution was about to expire at midnight, and as a consequence, they had to cut through the flesh of the prisoner to find the correct vein. One of them died painfully. The other member, they just left the guy's vein open, but the warrant of execution did expire. Also, Kenneth E. Smith was sentenced to death. However, the staff was unable to insert the lethal injection. How would you propose to a different type of method of execution? You said something about a suffocation as a peaceful death in Switzerland. Okay, but at the end of the day, suffocation is also a painful death. It is most likely, it is basically them in a gas chamber. Also, Swiss has 100% effective in that country, but what about the other countries around the world? Also, in other countries like China, North Korea, and Iran, they use public executions, and they don't care if they don't treat them as human, they treat them as animals in a way until they're executed. At that point, they just execute people for their own political gain as a fear factor as well. It's basically almost like genocide. What about firing squad? You never mentioned about firing squad. Yeah, that is also inhumane, but at the end of the day, firing squad is also the most effective way to execute someone, but it is also in the right way other factors that a firing squad is not also affected, because a firing squad could also lead to a painful and suffocating death, just like the suffocation. And then you said, I mentioned before about solitary, you mentioned solitary confinement. The people on death row, they think every day about their fate. Obviously, some of them, they do deserve about, them dying, but the others, they think about their fate, and they sometimes regret it. But at the end of the day, that's their decision, but they do think about their fate until their day has come to be executed. You also mentioned about death penalty defined as a religion. Religion has nothing to do with the death penalty. In fact, it is more of a deterrence by other religions. I'm also, like, other Catholics, like we mentioned before, they're excused from the jury line. Death penalty is irreversible, because once it's happened, they can never bring that human person back, especially when it comes to the innocent person. There are other programs to reform as well, other than death penalty, because at the end of the day, life of sentences, they're already stay there in the prison system for life. So I don't understand why they should be executed. Taking a human life is the right way, because we are the only ones of a democratic country out of 195 recognized countries, 55 of them, they're authoritarian regimes. There's only 3 of those 55 that are democracies. That's the United States, Japan, and India. They use the justice system as fair and free trial, but in other countries they don't. So how would you explain that to China, North Korea, Russia? We've tried to abolish it, but the United States has veto power in the UN General Assembly.
Yeah, I'll be super quick. Can I use a minute of prep time?
A minute per time, sure.
Thank you.
And your name?
Marshall? Your group has come here today to argue that the death penalty should be abolished because it's inhumane, corrupt, and cruel and unusual punishment. But I'd like to argue that so is the rest of the judicial system, the criminal justice system. Does that mean we abolish the entire system, or should we instead fix it and change it for the better? Ensure there's no corruption and no racism involved. You like to bring up that the methods we use are barbaric, inhumane, cruel and unusual punishment. We're no longer confined to these old barbaric ways of execution, such as the lethal injections or electric chair. Instead, we can go back to the firing squad, which you argue is inhumane, but I would say otherwise. The firing squad methods, all the people who are firing are blindfolded, and only one person is given an actual bullet while the others are given a blank. So no one has the guilt of actually firing the bullet and killing them, as well as there is proven to be 0 botched executions by using the firing squad method. You also continue to criticize the sarcopod, saying it suffocates the person that is executed inside it, but that is incorrect. The sarcopod gets rid of the CO2 and oxygen, it adds CO2 and removes oxygen, and the person who inside falls asleep and faces no pain, no suffocation, and instead they die in their sleep peacefully. It's also used for people who are in the hospital and wish to die and not continue suffering. That's also an alternative they have for those people. You continue to bring up China and say that the way they use the death penalty is corrupt and horrible, which I agree, but we are not China. China uses the death penalty in a utilitarian way, and in the US, the death penalty is used in a virtue ethics way. The death penalty is not just for anyone, but is exclusively for the worst criminals alive who cannot be trusted to walk amongst others in our society. Would you trust a serial rapist, a serial murderer to walk among you or be reformed? Some people just can't change or be helped. Earlier you brought up how Alabama didn't botch many executions. Well, that's because they didn't follow protocol. Instead, they went against the law and did things the way they wanted to. That isn't on the death penalty, that's on them. That's just another example that the death penalty should instead be fixed and corrected instead of abolished completely. That'll be it.
Can we take one more minute of prep time, please?
Yeah.
What alternative do you have to the system? You mentioned abolishing the system. What do you have to substitute that?
In what case?
Can I take this one?
Oh, yeah, if you
We can create fair and more equal guidelines within our criminal justice system that allow for a better process for criminals to go through to get to the death penalty, rather than just basing it off certain qualities like race, like our criminal justice system does now. We can provide better guidelines and standards for how the death penalty takes place for criminals who commit the worst crimes.
And we weren't arguing for abolishing it, we're arguing for correcting it and fixing it.
And explain that to the other countries who use it as a deterrent of fear. Don't
What?
just explain it to just the United States. I get it that we also have a corrupt system here in the United States, but try to explain that to the other countries like we just mentioned, like Iran and China and North Korea. We have tried to abolish the death penalty as a whole on the UN General Assembly, but there was one country who did not approve of abolishing it, and that was the United States. And at the end of the day, the United States has veto power. The other four countries, China and Russia, they did approve of abolishment, but at the end of the day, the United States has veto power. We've tried to abolish that. So how do you explain it to the other countries that still use it as a deterrent of fear? You're saying to fix the system.
We're focusing on fixing the system in our country first. We're not focusing on other countries. But I'd like to go back to what you said, Mondo, actually, about how giving these people a second chance The person that I brought up earlier, Jorge Avila Torres, was given a second chance. And after killing that 20-year-old Navy petty officer, he later raped 2 children and killed them. So that, I know, was one case, but I'm sure it's one of many. What do you have to say against, like giving people a second chance?
Giving people a second chance in the matter of that case?
No, I'd say like giving people a second chance, and they again have the possibility to kill again.
Was he proven that he was, that he committed a crime before he was released? Yeah.
When you say give a second chance, it's all up to the person who is given that chance. It is not the system, it is not the government's will. They are given the chance, it's their choice to change it.
So are you willing to risk that chance and the small possibility that they don't change for them to go and kill again?
Everyone should be given at least a chance to prove themselves.
And
Can I say something?
Sure.
I was gonna bring up, seems like you guys are trying to keep this system, trying to keep your death penalty argument just in the United States, but you kind of open the door to other countries when one of your huge reforms of humane death penalty, the pods, come from Sweden. You kind of open that door. I feel like you can't just say, they're using the pods in Sweden, and you open that international door when you use that argument. So that's
Can I respond to that question?
To others as well.
Can we respond to that question?
Do you allow
It's
us
up
to
to you.
respond?
It's up to you.
I think, yeah, it's just a technology that originates from Switzerland. We're not taking their ideologies, their laws. We're just taking an invention they've created in Switzerland and bringing it here. I don't think that requires bringing their ideology, their laws, their politics, or whatsoever into it.
yes, I feel like you guys are blaming the United States for the fault of other countries who are in very far extremes of the death penalty, like Iran and North Korea. And in the United States differ drastically from those two countries. That's it.
Yeah, okay, right. Whenever you're,
Okay, yes,
okay, okay.
All in all, as my team explained, the death penalty should be abolished due to numerous reasons. Number 1, wrongful convictions involving minorities. Number 2, the risk of botched executions. Number 3, the reality of international executions. And number 4, the unethical and unjust principle of death penalty. Here, I, Sierra Pope, the last speaker of the affirmative side, want to put a few emphasis on a couple of these points. For too many years, wrongful convicted individuals have lost their lives to capital punishment, and for some of their names will be said again from what Kennedy previously stated, which is Carlos de Luna, Larry Griffin, and George Steeny. On June 16, 1944, George Steeny Jr., a 14-year-old black boy who only weighed 90 pounds, was arrested for murdering 2 white girls. Without any evidence or witnesses, the judge sentenced George to death by the electric chair. Fast forward 7 years later, a hearing was held, and now George is noted as innocent within the court system. In this moment, just put yourselves in the shoes of wrongfully convicted individuals like George Steeny Jr. Put yourselves in the shoes of family and friends who have lost innocent loved ones. Truly allow yourselves to consider the inhumane aspect of the death penalty, which doesn't just affect us Americans, but it's a worldly occurrence. The opposite side is actually quite blind to this, though. The first speaker only spoke on the behalf of the United States. But as we know, international executions are far from gracious. To reiterate what our first affirmative speaker said, Saudi Arabia, along with other authoritarian regimes, practice mass executions that prioritize efficiency over human decency, according to the Amnesty International. Really think about that. Put yourselves in the shoes of international persons who are deprived of human rights. and have to undergo harsh punishment for efficient performance, as one would say. You cannot dismiss the simple fact that killing people is wrong. However, the opposite side believes that the death penalty is quote-unquote beneficial and humane, and also justified capital punishment with the thought of tradition. But as we all know, the world is changing daily. The same tactics used during the early 1900s are not applicable for the 21st century. To restate what Kennedy said once more, coming from the activists of the Death Penalty Action Campaign, we need to execute justice, not people. Again, truly think about that. Justice is never served with the death penalty at hand, whether it's by the electric chair, suffocation, or lethal injections. It's time we enforce justice, not seek after revenge, because an eye for an eye will only get you so far. Therefore, we must abolish the death penalty today. Thank you.
Yep. So, today I'm here to bring this argument to a close by establishing the death penalty is the true form of it's morally correct. We can undertake it in very morally correct ways, in ways that, don't have botched executions. We leave the fault of incorrect, innocent lives. We leave that to the criminal justice system, which we can reform. That is the true place where we need to provide reformation. Our moral framework of tradition was used to serve that modern day law stems from the fact that that tradition of the death penalty has been used for decades. It was used for only the worst of the worst criminals. And in the cases where innocent people's lives were put at risk, they were very minimal. Cases like that rarely happen, and if we correct the criminal justice system, then we can attack that problem. The death penalty can be used in a very morally and ethically correct way for monsters who've committed the worst of crimes. You provided names of the innocent people, but I'm about to provide you names of monsters who have committed crimes that shouldn't get a second chance. I mean, Ted Bundy, 30 murders, and with over 100 or more that they possibly couldn't find. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer murdered several teenage boys and was still put in the death penalty. Absolutely serves him right. I mean, let's be honest here. Do we want these killers on our streets? The opposition is promoting for the protection of innocent lives, but is okay with murderers like this getting a second chance and possibly killing again. That is simply just not morally correct. Unlike the death penalty, which can be used to stop these murderers, to put them to death, to end this problem. The sarcopod that we provided is a morally correct way to do this. A euphoric death, it's not suffocation, it's euphoric, it's pleasant, they go to sleep. You're not botching the execution like you would with lethal injection, you're not messing it up like that. You are providing an ethical way for criminals who have committed the worst of crimes to be put to death, to end that problem. You would save more innocent people each year by putting these criminals to death rather than just letting them walk on the streets. The death penalty provides an answer to this problem. George Sidney Jr., the person that you brought up, correct, was killed from a time of prejudice and racism, and his case is over 50 years old. This was a case of pure racism and hate. This would be considered a new case in the modern day. We've had reformations in our criminal justice system to be able to tackle these problems of racism and prejudice. If we implement more reformation in our criminal justice system, rather than just completely eliminating the death penalty, we would tackle the problem of racism within our decision picking of the death penalty. The fault of the death penalty itself is not the problem. The true problem is the people who are behind the decisions of who gets put to death and who doesn't. the death penalty, it is ethical. We've provided evidence several times that it can be done in a very ethical way. Yeah, I think that's all I have.
I don't think you tell us. I believe you give it to Professor Lane.
Right.
Yeah, you give it to James though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
but which team?
I wouldn't be able to, well, tell you all the points.
Can you tell us who
Right now.
won?
Can you tell us who won?
I can't, I need to tell
That's not a
you
good
the points,
idea.
right?
Just off the
Yeah.
top of the dome.
Please be ask the audience, what do you
Yeah.
think?
I have a lot of points. I took a lot of notes.
Good,
So
right.
I have a
So,
lot
I didn't
to
ask
say.
for that
So-
one.
I can try to summarize
Awesome
it as
leader.
nicely as possible, I promise.
all right,
Okay.
yeah, please do. Do you want to come up here and, yeah, sure, all right. Maybe you can introduce your name?
Yes, I will, just so y'all see how many notes. I
Sure.
took.
Oh my. Right. Your name?
My name is Liliana Nicole Maldonado.
Okay, all right, let's hear from Liliana, all right.
Hi, I'm Puerto Rican.
Oh, Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so both of y'all made really, really good points. I'm not going to deny that. I have my own opinion about the death penalty. I do think that with severe crimes such as, such as Jeffrey Dahmer, all these criminals, 100%. In fact, I'm in a political science class right now, and my mom is a lawyer. She did work within the government as well, where we saw a lot of crimes in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is also very corrupt. So I do understand in severe cases, I do think, yes, the death penalty should be abolished. But you guys also did make really good points with those examples where we do have to make sure we have factual evidence before we give the death penalty to someone, because death is in fact irreversible. You were really good, especially. You had a very soft tone, very convincing. You did make me think about it for sure. The only things that I would give y'all pointers on is try not to stutter and all that stuff, but that's natural. We get nervous, 100%. You were also really good, especially with the examples, you as well. You had good points, however, they made a good point against you that religion is not a valid argument. I'm sorry to tell you that, buddy. We are way past that, okay? You as well. All of you made good points. I think back and forth, the best solution that Isaac offered was we all just need to reform the system, and what's within the other world, that is also not justifiable. I have to agree with you there. And maybe the U.S. should actually vote, especially if they have a majority power, to help fix their issues. But I also see his point, and as a mother, like, not as a mother, someone with a mother that works within the law system, and someone who's seen that, because I was in my mom's office a lot growing up. We don't have the power over the judges. So the solution to that I've learned is one of the biggest things you can do is raise people right, raise them to be good people. Most of the time, these criminals go through horrible things, which, sad to tell you, when they reach that age, they don't change. Majority of the time. However, the also alternate solution, my English is not the best, is to fix the judicial system, which that is a completely separate entity. And that can also, the biggest example I can give you is a lot of people think, oh my God, we need to choose this president, he's gonna fix all our problems. That's not the truth. The problem is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has all the power over all of the other branches of the government system. So I hope that summarizes all my points for you. All of y'all are really good. Those are just things I work on. Yeah, I also own stance after hearing both of y'all's sides and what I think comes to the best cases. The best thing to do is fix the system, make sure we're not overlooking things, and definitely there are certain things that are just out of our control, which that's okay, but that doesn't mean we give up on working on them. So yeah, all of y'all are really good. That is my point after hearing both of y'all.
Thank you.
She should be the judge, right? My
I took a lot of notes.
Yeah, she came in here with that speech prepared.
What,
undercover boss?
Yeah.
So I have all the comments written down, and I'll give it to, sorry, your name?
Alex.
Alex, and Alex will give it to Professor Brian. So a few things I would like to comment. you all did really well despite the whole hiccups and, disorganized and that sort of thing. And I guess Kennedy, you were nervous because you had to go first, so that's understandable by what Miriam was saying. So I like all your points, they're really good. No preferences for any side, so I'll tally your points and you will know who is going to be the winning team. So a few things, so try not to look at your notes too much. And, sorry?
No, that too. I noticed like some of y'all were just looking at your computers.
Yeah.
I used to do that. Best thing is to just speak from your heart.
Speak from your heart, and then also try to establish eye contact, build rapport, relationships with the audience. And then obviously, amongst yourself as speakers, because at the end of the day, what you're telling us, okay, they're just words, black and white, okay, and that means we have nothing to read. So we can only, based on what you're telling us, to create that sort of imaginations in our minds. And that means you have to be an effective speaker to give it to us, right? So for instance, right, so you mentioned that we need to execute justice, not people, right? You could have stressed on the word not, because you want to make a point across that we need to execute justice, not people. So then when you have that sort of like impact, right, stressing on a particular word, then you are essentially sending sort of like a signal to your audience, and that allows them to digest and absorb what you want them to get. And essentially, you want to convince them that you have the better arguments. So essentially, it's not who's right, who's wrong, but which team has the better arguments. And you want them to say, yes, that is the team that has the better arguments. Sounds good? Mm-hmm. Right, so try not to read too much from your notes, okay? Look at us, right? Because we want to see your expressions. We want to look at you. We want to feel what you feel, whether you're against it, whether you're for it. And then even all these examples that you were given, like, China, North Korea, Iran, with public execution and things like that, right? So words are just words, but you have to make those words feel alive by stressing on certain words, by adding your feelings, your emotions, your expressions into that, okay? And even though, like, the topic itself, it's very gloom, right? But you can also add a little bit of humor, okay? Because then you actually try to build that sort of like interactions with your audience, rather than to have your audience sit down and just go on listening like it's a lecture kind of thing. So if you add that into it a little bit, it actually gives them, right, more motivation to listen to you, and then obviously, to keep them paying attention to you and not on your phones or anything else. Good? Right. Of all, Ethan was the only one who relied the least on his notes. He stood up, and then he was standing at that corner. So he was trying really hard to try to like look at us, right? And I would say, of all, he successfully established that sort of rapport and eye contact with us. Good job. So I'm not saying you should step out from your comfort zone or everything, or like what he did. No, but at least he was trying his best to look at us, right? To make us feel what he's feeling, because he's the last speaker and he summarizes like his team's entire argument, right? And the same for you as well. You did really well by summarizing your team's arguments and all of that. But what you could have done was to really, because you have really good points. And I like so I wrote it down that we need to execute justice, not people, right? It's not people that we're executing, it's justice that we're gunning it for. So you need to make the point across to it. Yes, you don't have to do the handsome of it, but that's it, right? I really enjoyed myself, so thank you so much to your professor for inviting me. Anything else you would like for me to add on to that?
Announce the winner.
Well, unfortunately, I'll pass the responsibility over to, yeah. All right. Good job. You guys are,
We did ours.
in terms of yours as an assignment for this class,
Yeah.
that I don't know.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
so
you
you're
don't have
not
control
grading,
of that?
you're not grading.
No, that'll be your professor. My job is just to come here and judge your behavior. Anything else? Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. All right, and thank you so much for coming and supporting that. All right, and then for the glitch and you having to sit on the floor, I should. Yeah. So Alex, you should buy them dinner or something. Everything is in there. Volunteer work is not paid, right? Yeah, not paid. Yeah, so everything's in there, the rating, the rubric, the signing sheet, everything is there. Right, and then the time is there. Okay, well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, he has it.
Oh, there it is.
Signing sheets, it's back to him now. Not my responsibility.
Yeah, I just want to.
I didn't know we had to sign this.
Well, if you want, I should put it for your other class.
Oh, okay.
You're awesome. Thank you, Judge. You should make you the judge.
I got a lot, yeah, I say a lot. I got a lot of saying a lot of things.
¿What article?
Ya, yo soy Carolina. Yo nací ahí, viví por 12 años, me mudé después del huracán. Llevo aquí como 6 años.
Ay, ¿dónde te quedas aquí?
Originalmente yo viví en Claremont y después me vine a una relación porque los dos son demasiado caros.
Yo soy de Juárez. de México.
Oh, really?
Pero,
I was gonna try to get some of y'all's contacts.
I want to be honest. I am not for the death penalty.
Really?
No, yeah, right. I'm not.
I think honestly,
I'm not.
as someone that has insider like experience, and as someone that's in a political science class right now, and
What class is it?
I'm just taking the basic class. I feel like I pay a lot of attention, and honestly, yeah, it's just like there's things that are out of our control, there's things that are in our control, and sometimes I think that you actually are going to even if you don't, there's things we can't fix, but we can balance things like the process.
Are you a freshman?
I am a freshman.
Are you in the political science major?
I'm actually a marketing major.
You're a marketing major.
But I love political science. I was thinking about majoring, but I just can't afford it.
I would totally
So-
recommend it. So I plan to go to law school. This is my senior year
Oh,
at
really?
UNT. And I'm in the political side. He is too.
If
Both
you
of us.
need some, my mom's a lawyer, so if you ever need some advice or anything, she worked in San Quentin, Puerto Rico, which is like against corruption and everything. So that's what I'm saying. It's just a lot of the insider, and like when you see things in real life, you actually get to understand what's going on.
This is why I'm so upset.
You seem very passionate about it. Why don't you feel away?
The only thing I don't like is that it's so inflexible. What I mean by that is like once you start somewhere, it's hard to transfer. Like let's say you move, because my mom, she's great, she's amazing. She was a boss before, and everything. When we moved here, Texas was like, you have to take one test, you have to do this.
You have to
Did
take
you
the
retake
Texas
the
bar.
Yeah, and the Texas bar, and then but basically, she's asked her, but she can practice law here,
Yeah.
but she doesn't have that same type of decision.
Did she go to law school
In Puerto Rico, yeah. And the problem is that a lot of the universities are losing their accreditations, which is why I think should be
See, I have some friends, their parents are lawyers in Mexico, and they found the same problem
And
in the
you
United
can't, once
States.
you're there, you can't leave. And that's the problem, like, I don't know where I'm gonna settle in life, but my boyfriend is just So, yeah, I need something that's flexible. Maybe once I know where I am, then sure, we can go to law school. You know, I don't have that experience. It's just that until I know, I don't like to
You don't want to just jump into it.
No,
I
no,
get it.
yeah, well, that's my 2 cents. So, yeah.
What was your name? Excuse me.
I've been practicing.
I do have experience.
Oh, okay, no, I'm sorry. I'm not actually.
Is this not for the?
No, I didn't know there was one. I was the president of my own board, so Puerto Rico Student Association. So,
Wait, this is just a class. That we're taking. Yeah, this for a grade.
so yeah, no, I'm still getting. It's also just I don't really have time for some things because I'm in American Marketing Association and I'm also going to say because like my board's like me, so I'm trying to learn.
I stay busy. That's all I can tell you. Stay busy.
I
It's nice meeting
know,
you.
and I've been able to have a nice day.
Where you going?
I'm going to go meet my girlfriend.
Yeah, I took my boots. I was like,
work on it for you.
What's your name?
I'm Jesse.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Did you also want to connect? You seem really cool. Yeah. I was just like waiting for this done.
Sorry, I kept,
You're all
it's the
good.
first one.
The first one. You're all
I
good.
kept trying to hit the L and I was hitting those N's and I was
No,
like.
you're all good. Here you go. I like to connect with
I
people.
appreciate your
That's super
criticism
cool.
though.
Of
You
course.
have a good
Yeah.
one.
You have a great day. If you ever need anything, hit me up.
Just brought you
Yeah.
in here today.
Extra credit.
Oh, really?
I think I did, but let me double check. I do want that extra credit. I'm trying to get my grade up to 100.
Oh, the,
Yes, I did sign that. And wrote that.
Okay.
your key card is different.
Probably because you're in a different language.
Oh, no, it's just wider.
Oh, it's an iPhone 15. So, yeah. All right, there you go. Cool. Nice to meet you.
Do I have to sign
Yeah,
in
no,
or
I'm
was it just for the
here
guests?
for that
Did you need
extra credit. I gotta do anything to get
As
that
one of
credit
the speakers.
Sorry, I
Okay.
gotta go through.
Sorry.
All right, nice to meet you too. What's your name?
Armando, what's your name?
Liliana. I'm
Liliana?
also gonna give you my phone. Sorry, I'll be connecting with everybody. Gotta get that network. But yeah, I'm trying. I have a 96, but I just wanted to get to 100. So, because I need that 4.0.
Are you a freshman?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna just warn you, political science 3300 is gonna beat you now.
Sorry, I need to go really soon. Could you hand
I don't have a thing.
I'm not a political science major, but if I choose to go to law school, we'll see.